from the People's Assembly Committee, and Rob has also been working hard on the policy document that it's called In Place of Austerity, and everyone will be able to get a copy of that on the way out this evening. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much. Along with the industrial action to defend public services, jobs and pensions, there's no doubt about it, the mobilisations that you organised, as Dave has already reminded us, your mobilisations played an essential role in the victory of Jeremy Corbyn in last year's Labour Party leadership election, and in particular, the magnificent response we saw from People's Assembly campaigners across Britain to the result of last year's general election, where instead of despondency and despair, there was anger and protest. We took to the streets in escalating numbers and gave the kind of response that was necessary to that government's election victory and created the conditions in which Jeremy could win that leadership election. But now we have to show the same enthusiasm, the same elan, in terms of the battle of ideas that needs to be fought on two fronts. It's not a battle of ideas in the Labour movement that was concluded at the Labour Party conference last week. It's only just commenced. And of course, we have the ongoing battle of ideas against this Tory government. And Dave reminded me of one important battle, and that's this propaganda, monthly propaganda, echoed loyally by almost all of the mass media, I've got to say of course except for the Morning Star, that asks us to rejoice every month because the number of people at work in Britain has gone up. It's gone up every month since the end of the Black Death in 1349. Because barring a world war or two, the population has gone up almost every month since 1349. And of course, it's to avoid the awkward question, why do we still have nearly 2 million people unemployed and millions more who want to work but who can't find work? It's part of the battle of ideas that we expose those myths. But it's also part of the battle of ideas that we put forward the positive alternatives that are in the interests of the working class and people generally across Britain. And that's what this draft document, In Place of Austerity, seeks to do with your help, with your previous contributions and with the contributions today. And I just want to single out one or two important areas. The first one is housing. I grew up reading horrendous reports in the Daily Mirror, the Daily Herald, rest in peace, now better known as the Sun, and the Daily Worker, about the evils of Rachmanism, private landlordism, greedy, exploitative, often oppressive and violent private landlords, battening on people's need to have a roof over their head. And it's back. That kind of private landlordism is back with a vengeance. It's not carried out necessarily with the same openly gangsterist methods, but it's certainly back. And we should salute those tenants in London and elsewhere who are fighting against this return of a modern type of Rachmanism. We should salute the work of Defend Council Housing, Shelter and other campaigning organisations that are seeking to highlight this issue. And we're calling for a whole number of policy measures within the public sector. This is why it's relevant to this part of today's deliberations. Within the public sector, we need 3 million new council homes to begin to address the severe housing crisis that we have and to stem the growth of greedy, exploitative private landlordism. We still have work to do in this policy area. For example, on the question of second homes. More than 1 million empty residences in Britain. Not empty because work is due to begin on them or because they're uninhabitable. They're empty because it suits their wealthy owners to keep them empty for one reason or another. That's something we need to address, and we should welcome the announcement from Jeremy Corbyn at the Labour conference that limits will be lifted on local authority borrowing so that local councils can engage once again in council house building. On the health service, Danielle has just outlined from the front line the crisis that our health service faces as the result of privatisation and marketisation. And it's a crisis that exists in England, Scotland and Wales, but it takes slightly different forms in those countries. For example, in Wales there are a whole number of problems in the health service, but there's not the financial crisis that so many trusts are now facing in England, imminent bankruptcy in some cases, because the Welsh governments have never gone in for the programmes of PFI and privatisation that have happened in England. That's the reason why there's been such a sustained, vicious campaign attacking, denigrating the National Health Service in Wales. It's because there has not been that programme of ruinously expensive privatisation there. There's been less privatisation in Scotland as well, but a little more than in Wales. We need to take note of these national differences in terms of how we project our policies. And similarly, the dispute between the government and the junior doctors has still not been resolved, but I don't hear many voices in the media asking, why is that dispute reported as if it's a dispute across the whole of Britain, but it's a dispute that's confined to England? The Scottish and Welsh governments have settled with the junior hospital doctors on terms that are mutually beneficial and agreeable to all, and the health service hasn't collapsed. So, again, we need to be conscious of these particular questions when we're putting forward our policies. But let me just finish by referring to the biggest issues of privatisation and nationalisation of all. And make no mistake, this question is at the centre of the battle of ideas that will be fought out in the Labour movement, and we have to make it the centre of the battle of ideas against this Tory government and its policies. We've seen what's happened to the railway industry. We have the most expensive and yet the most subsidised railway industry in Europe. We've seen what's happened as far as the postal services are concerned. And Dave Ward has said a little bit about that. But we also have this enormous rip-off of the basic fundamental human need for heating and lighting. We've seen the crookery that goes on in the gas, water and electricity industries. And surely we've got to take the lead in saying we've had enough of commissions of inquiry, we've had enough of reviews, ombudspeople, czars, regulators. They've tried every dodge to avoid the main question. It's because the profiteers have got a monopoly grip on domestic energy in Britain that we have these enormous energy prices, and at the same time we have such a disastrous record when it comes to building and investing in energy capacity and alternative sources of sustainable energy here in Britain. So we're calling, in our document, in place of austerity, we're calling for public ownership, not only of rail and mail, but for the energy industries and the other privatised industries and services as well. How can it be done? Well, there's a model that would suit the railway industry. There's another model, no doubt, that can be produced as far as Royal Mail is concerned, and there are some very interesting examples to learn from in terms of different models of public and social ownership in Europe and beyond. We have to do more thinking about exactly how we believe public ownership, renationalisation, can be achieved. But even if the worst came to the worst, and we had to buy back all or a majority of all those shares that are now in private and corporate ownership, do you know what? The cost would still come to less than half of the amount of money that could be found to bail out Britain's banking industry. So as I say, public ownership has got to be at the centre of the battle of ideas within the Labour movement and against this Tory government. Doesn't mean to say we spend most of our time from now on debating policies and we wind down the mobilisations. The mobilisations are going to be vital if we're going to win those battles of ideas on both fronts. But we have an enormous amount of work to do. There's one little job perhaps I could just suggest. The slogan up there, Cameron must go. I was thinking of bringing a bucket and paint and a paintbrush and perhaps altering it, but let it stand as a warning to Theresa May, because he did go. And let's make sure that banner is seen on our massive demonstration tomorrow.